Hello and welcome to episode 2411 of Effectively Wild, a baseball podcast from FanGraphs presented by our Patreon supporters. I am Ben Lindbergh of The Ringer, rejoined by Meg Rowley of FanGraphs, who is in lovely Orlando for the MLB winter meetings where, as we speak on Monday afternoon, no major moves have happened except for Jeff Kent into Cooperstown. And even Jeff Kent is not actually moving to Cooperstown, presumably. Just a plaque of Jeff Kent will be. Hopefully a good likeness, but we'll see.
I cannot believe how disrespectful you're being to Mike Soroka. I just I'm offended on behalf of his entire family. I had a whole little Mike Soroka thing planned, and you were just like, doesn't matter. It's a big league deal, Ben. You have no respect for a big league deal. But yes, it has been quiet so far.
Yes,
quiet.
I was going to say, I was going to blow up your spot because before we hit record, you were bemoaning the lack of moves. So you're not exactly Miss Mike Soroka appreciator either.
Yeah, I mean, I'm here for a good joke, as we all know. And I now desperately need them to trade for Mike Sirota, which, unlikely given that he's a Dodger now. But give me a Soroka-Sirota mashup. I believe that Soroka is actually going by Michael Soroka, which perhaps indicates that he doesn't like all of our little jokes. But I'm going to keep enjoying the Mike Soroka potential. Or maybe I should just switch to Mike Sirota because we haven't quite tapped that well yet. Anyway,
or maybe Mike Soroka could come out of retirement.
I'm just saying there are so many possibilities.
There's just so many.
All we are limited by is our imaginations.
Mikes with similar last names.
Yeah.
Well, when and if something does happen, you can assign the FanGraphs reaction via your voice, potentially, instead of via Slack message. So that will be completely different. And I'm sure you have some good David Appelman-funded dinners on tap, which I'll wish that I could join. And if you have the Branzino, then I hope that it's not interrupted by a major signing this time.
Thank you. Yeah, we got through our dinner last night, which was lovely, without any major interruption, no big signings or trades. So I am appreciative. I did not have Branzino, but that's because it wasn't on offer. But we had a lovely meal. We're at an official Disney World property here, Ben. Although for the real winter meetings heads, not the Swan and Dolphin, which was the venue of choice for many years, although I never attended winter meetings there. This is my first Orlando winter meetings. We are at the Signia by Hilton, which, as we maybe discussed at one point on the pod, has inspired a low-level vibe of rebellion from the assembled baseball industry folks, because where are my Marriott points? Nowhere to be found in this Hilton property. But yeah, we're here. It poured last night. It was torrential. My hair can only be described as attempting to exit my head via humidity. So there's that. I can see the Tower of Terror just out the window here from the hotel. There it is. There's the Tower of Terror. I don't think that we're going to have any opportunities to go into the parks, but I can see that. I can see the Tower of Terror. There it is.
Well, I would not be patronizing the Tower of Terror, even if I had time. I prefer not to be terrified, if possible.
You're not a drop ride guy?
No, not particularly. I do have some big news to break here on the podcast. Really, it's a correction to issue. Not of a mistake of my own, of course, just a correction to relay, which is that on the last episode, which you were absent for due to travel, I was joined by our pal and former co-host, Sam Miller.
Yes.
And I was also joined at the start of that episode by Effectively Wild scorekeeper Chris Hannell, who wanted to remind me and Sam that we had conducted a draft of 25 and under pitchers way back in the year 2015 on episode 669. And Chris told us what the results were of that draft.
Yes.
Or so we thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a miscalculation. So what happened here, evidently, which Chris detailed on Blue Sky, the official EW Stats account, in something like an 11-post thread. If you want all the gory details, I will link to it here, and you could give that account a follow if you care to. But there was a bit of a misread of some cells in a spreadsheet, evidently, because the surprising result seemed to be that I had been winning this draft for years. And then it seemed to turn out that Sam won, and that seemed to be a result of the warp model changing, and that warp being calculated differently had changed the results and had bolstered Sam's draftees. It turns out that was not actually the case. And what happened somehow was that Kendall Graveman's stats were confused with Carlos Martinez's stats. And so there was some warp misallocated because of this. And thus, I should have won and did win. And it was just a bit of a misread of the stats. And this was noted by the eagle-eyed Raymond Chen, Patreon supporter and Effectively Wild wiki keeper, who frequently spots my mistakes and tells me about them, but in a constructive way, of course, unfailingly. But this mistake led to Sam being labeled the winner when he was actually the loser, and the actual final scores, according to Chris, were 74.3 wins above replacement player for my draftees and 63.7 for Sam. So Chris actually mentioned in that appearance that there seemed to be something wonky going on with Carlos Martinez, that his calculations had taken a huge hit and he had dropped by more than 6 warp. And what actually happened is that he went up by more than 6 warp. But Kendall Graveman's stats, somehow there was a substitute there. So it was a real roller coaster to be reminded that this draft had taken place at all, because I had not thought about it for many a year, and to be informed that I had lost, and then to subsequently be informed that, in fact, I had won. So I experienced all the emotions, and don't worry, I will not monologue about this one at length, because I'm not nearly as invested in this as I was in my minor league free agent draft triumph, which I will remind everyone was not just that I won, it was the way that I won, going 10 for 10, in case anyone forgot that happened. That was why I took several victory laps. This one, I'll just say that the record has now been corrected, but I will gloat no further.
Sure. How refined of you, really.
Yes.
As opposed to the last time when you behaved in a way that made me question whether you had been raised right. You know, I started having doubts about you and your entire family, Ben. But yeah, I think that, mistakes happen. We correct the record and we move on.
Yeah. No big deal. Yeah, we had a nice time talking about it with Sam regardless. And we're all about accuracy here at Effectively Wild. Those are the actual results. Now we know. And I have to report to you another result, which I'm somewhat miffed about, because I was evidently the runner-up, really, in what is the most important competition, which is number of times visiting John Brebbia's FanGraphs player page in 2025.
You were the runner-up?
I was number 2. So for those who did not know,
ahead of you?
I've been wondering that all weekend. So the equivalent of Spotify Wrapped and all the end-of-year podcast listening stats came out for FanGraphs last week for FanGraphs subscribers and supporters. So FanGraphs Walk Off. You can check that out, and it'll tell you your stats about all the pages you visited and the parts of the site and the authors you read and the player pages and all the rest. And one of the fun things is that it tells you which player pages you visited most often. And my top 3, my top ones were very basic, very standard. Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani, Cal Raleigh. Okay, sure. I'm the most normie FanGraphs player page visitor I can imagine. Number 8 on my list, however, was John Brebbia.
Right.
But I was not the most prolific Brebbia visitor in 2025. I was number 2, having visited his page 21 times, which And that's, I don't know if I was logged in for 100% of my my Brebbia visits, but let's say I was.
Yeah.
Who could have possibly out-visited me? Could it have been John Brebbia himself?
Or maybe his agent.
Or his agent. And I'm sure that, there's a strict secrecy and privacy and all the rest. And I just, if we could pull some strings and I could just see under the hood here and you're seeing Appleman this week in Orlando, if you could maybe just ask Appleman, check the IPs.
Yeah.
Is it John Brebbia himself? Because I'd feel fine about John Brebbia visiting his own player page more often than I did, or his agent, someone who has a direct financial stake in John Brebbia's performance. I think that would be excusable for me to be the runner-up. But if there's just a bigger Brebbia fan out there who is not either Brebbia or affiliated with Brebbia, then that would disappoint me. So I'm just consumed. If there is a bigger Brebbia visitor out there, out yourself. Tell me, show me the screenshots. I want to see the evidence of you as the number one Brebbia man.
I'm sorry. I don't think that we can violate user trust like that. Like we take seriously the notion of some amount of data privacy. Yeah. So I don't think I can. But again, isn't it fun though to think, sure, the likely answer, Ben, the likely answer is that it's either Brebbia himself, or based on sort of the vibe of the man that we've gotten, both from other coverage and your conversation with him, more likely his agent, because Brebbia didn't strike me as the kind of guy to dwell on his own player page,
No, definitely it could be a frequent FanGraphs visitor, though. So
Sure.
And I would hope that he's a paying subscriber, I mean, look, let's be honest. If I were a player, I would be visiting my FanGraphs page pretty often.
Oh, sure. And I don't mean to say that I don't mean to say that there would be anything wrong with interrogating one's own player page and even delighting in it. But he didn't strike me as the type, He didn't seem like a guy who was going to be, despite being a guy who has fluency in stats and whatnot and doesn't seem put off by them. But he just didn't seem like the kind of guy to be like, oh, I got to go check.
Also, perhaps one would want to avoid one's stats if they looked like John Brebbia's in 2025. Sorry, John.
Yeah. But isn't it more fun to imagine rather than it being Brebbia's agent or the man himself, but Brebbia's agent in all likelihood, that perhaps it is some other enthusiastic fan of the podcast who has now become an enthusiastic fan of John Brebbia via your advocacy on Brebbia's behalf.
That is a nice thought. Yeah. Or there's just a bigger Brebbia fan who got to Brebbia way before I did and is like, oh, now you've just discovered John Brebbia? Finally? You're the John come lately, I guess, to John Brebbia. I mean, I'd like to think that there's someone out there who's just as into John Brebbia as me without actually being John Brebbia. So it's possible, but I was a little perplexed by that result. Here's a more predictable result. Another nice thing is that it gives you little awards and it tells you which parts of the site and where you've ranked overall. I got a little award for visiting all of my quote-unquote articles in 2025 because I pitched a perfect game. If you read all of one author's articles, then it says perfect game, and it gives you a little logo with a star. And so I went 144 for 144, and of course I couldn't have been otherwise because I post the podcast myself. Right. And so I have to go to my pages because it's the only way that the podcast gets posted. So it's not that I'm just obsessed with myself necessarily, or at least this is not a manifestation of that. It's purely a product of my posting the podcast. But I enjoyed that I got the little perfect game. Sure. I would guess I'm the only person who got a perfect game for Ben Lindbergh posts at FanGraphs who went 144 for 144 on the podcast posts because, you don't actually have to go to the post. You can download the podcast elsewhere.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Also, I will just remind everyone that Effectively Wild Secret Santa, you still have a chance to sign up if you care to, but registration ends this Wednesday, December 10th. So you got to sign up in the next couple days if you want to. I already have. It's a nice little thing every year for the Effectively Wild community. Whoever chooses to participate, you get randomly assigned someone else in the community who signs up, and you can send them a little gift. I think it's like a $25 suggested maximum, but you can do whatever you want. Just send a little gift and hopefully get it to your recipient before or by or around Christmas time. And as I will always say, if you do intend to sign up, please only sign up if you intend to follow through.
Right.
do not give your recipient coal. Just every now and then, there's some risk you sign up. It's just on the honor system. We can't really penalize people who sign up and don't deliver. The vast majority do, I think. I always do, and I always get something. But some people get skunked every year, and it stinks. So don't be the person who signs up and then leaves someone giftless. But if you do intend to participate, it's a fun thing, and you're welcome to post photos in the Discord group or the Facebook group if you care to, but no requirement to. But yeah, spread some baseball holiday cheer with a fellow podcast listener if you care to. And you can check the sign-up sheet, which is linked on the aforementioned podcast post or in the episode description in your podcast app, wherever it's there. And this has been run by an Effectively Wild listener, Zach Wenkos, for many a year now. And I like it. I like that it still happens. So, yeah, get your sign up in now if you are going to.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Yep.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So we have a little bit of baseball news to discuss. A few trades or a couple trades that I want to touch on that happened last week that have not been discussed on the podcast. And we could talk a little bit of Jeff Kent. And also, can I just touch on sort of the dumbest drama that I've enjoyed lately?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So I always appreciate when a player goes to a team and then panders to that team's fan base, especially if that team has a real natural rival and really leans into that rivalry. And that has happened with Sonny Gray, who was traded to the Red Sox and immediately came out and kind of trashed the Yankees. And of course, he is a former Yankee. And his time in New York didn't go great. He didn't seem to be happy there. He didn't pitch his best. And then he moved on. And he came out and said, New York, it just wasn't a good situation for me. It wasn't a great setup for me and my family. I never wanted to go there in the first place. When I was there, which was from mid-2017 through 2018, it just didn't really work for who I am.
Yeah.
And then he said it was an immediate yes when he learned that the Cardinals wanted to trade him to Boston. What did factor into my decision to come to Boston, it feels good to me to go to a place now where, you know what, it's easy to hate the Yankees, right? It's easy to go out and have that rivalry and go into it with full force, full steam ahead. I like the challenge. So, I mean, what could you do to endear yourself to the Red Sox fan base than to say, yeah, I was a Yankee at one time, but I didn't like it, couldn't wait to get out of there, and now I'm happy to take the fight to them and to be on the other side of the Red Sox-Yankees rivalry. I mean, good messaging, right? Good way to ingratiate yourself. I guess he did say, I do appreciate my time in New York. He said that at some point. But mostly he was like, Yankees suck, New York sucks, down with the Yankees. Let's take them down. Okay, and if it had ended there, fine, whatever, would have been tabloid fodder in New York, and probably when Sonny Gray pitches against the Yankees, people would regurgitate it on the back page of the Post or on talk radio or whatever it is. However, I did not account for Brian Cashman and the potent force of off-season Brian Cashman, who will just say whatever. And I've celebrated this aspect of Brian Cashman before. He just doesn't care. He'll say whatever. Like, he's more frank, I think, than the typical baseball executive because he's been doing this job for so long.
So long.
Yeah, and he has such job security, and he can shoot from the hip a little bit. He can say things. He will be more open about things than other executives. And, sometimes it'll just be how he'll basically acknowledge that, yeah, Jean-Carl Stanton, he's going to get hurt at some point. We know that. He'll just say things like that. And sometimes he'll kind of badmouth players a little bit, and it's fun. Like he's, kind of combative, like not in like a really vindictive, but he'll go toe to toe with the media a little bit and kind of rag on people a little bit. And I enjoy that. And so he comes out, it's like the petty Brian Cashman,
Yeah.
And he's not going to let these Sonny Gray comments stand. So he fires back. I mean, I don't know if he volunteered this or he was asked maybe, but he's talking to reporters at the winter meetings on Sunday. And he basically says that Sonny Gray was lying about never wanting to pitch in New York. Yeah. So he says,
dun, dun, dun.
When he was with the A's, he was telling our minor league video coordinator, "You got to get me over to the Yankees," Cashman said. "Tell Cash, get me over to the Yankees. I want out of Oakland. I want a championship." He went on to say that Gray was communicating that to a number of different people, that he wants to be a Yankee. And then Cashman disclosed in his second season in the Bronx, Gray told Cashman that he was surprised that the Yankees hadn't traded him at the 2018 deadline. And Cashman said, "That's when he told me he never wanted to be here. He hates New York. This is the worst place. He just sits in his hotel room." And then Cashman says, when he reminded Gray that he had told people he wanted to be traded to the Yankees, Gray then blamed his agent, Bo McInnes. So we got people throwing people under the bus in every direction. "McInnes told me to do that," Gray said, according to Cashman. Cashman said, "Gray told him McInnes told me to lie because it wouldn't be good for my free agency to say there's certain places that I don't want to go to." And then the next act, there's another chapter in this saga of where Sonny Gray said he wanted to play and actually wanted to play. Bo McInnes, now he's had his honor and his integrity impugned. So he has to put out a statement. And he says to The Athletic, in 2017, Sonny did not have no trade rights with the Oakland A's, so he had no legal right to have input as to where he would be traded or if he would be traded. As such, he made no statement that he did or did not want to be traded to any specific team. And thus, there was no statement that could have included a lie. The Athletics had no obligation to inform Sonny of any trade communications they had with other clubs, so they never told him they were potentially trading him to any particular team. As an aside, if a player does not want to play for a particular club, thus potentially not performing at their best if they were with that team, it does not help their career and future free agency to lie their way into a trade to that club. Then the story says, a short while later, McInnes sent another message to The Athletic. So not content with that original statement, he elaborates and says, "So Brian is trying to make people believe I told Sonny to, in Cashman's words, lie to the minor league video guy to try to get Sonny to the Yankees, even though, per Cashman, Sonny did not want to be with the Yankees, to subsequently somehow help Sonny's free agency. This makes zero sense. Further, the words, 'I want out of Oakland,' have never been said by Sonny. He loved his time with the A's." Cashman goes on to say that he told Gray that he wished that Gray had told him beforehand that he didn't want to be in New York, that they tried to do their homework. I guess their homework didn't turn up, that Sonny Gray hates New York. And Sonny Gray, in his introductory press conference upon becoming a Yankee, said, "I couldn't be happier with how it all played out, and I couldn't be happier to be there," which we now know couldn't be true. He could have been happier. I mean, I guess I couldn't be happier to be there. I guess if you parse that, that could mean that he's actually unhappy to be there, but he couldn't be happier to be there. Like there's no way he could be happy about it. So he's actually miserable, but that's the happiest he could possibly be. But he also said, "I couldn't be happier with how it all played out," which would seem to be contradicted by his subsequent statements. So we have, we have Sonny Gray asserting something. We have Brian Cashman asserting that Sonny Gray lied. We then have McInnes, Gray's agent, asserting that Cashman lied about what Sonny Gray said about where he did or didn't want to play. This is my favorite low-stakes off-season drama so far because this is all so silly and mostly meaningless, but it seems to be pretty important to the people involved.
Okay, I don't want to imply intent, like that there is an intent to deceive on anyone's part involved in this. But here's a question for you. How reliable do you think that either of their memories are of some of these events? Because it strikes me, one thing about the Cashman of it all that struck me as odd is the notion that Sonny Gray would refer to Brian Cashman as Cash prior to him being a member of the Yankees. That seems a little odd to me. That seems potentially unlikely. And so I'm wondering, I'm wondering about whether people are remembering all of the things correctly in this and the sequence. And ultimately, there is a big, I feel like if the team on the other end of the I didn't like it there and never wanted to be meh and don't care for New York was any other team but the Yankees, that we wouldn't have really gotten any churn on this, right? It is a very Yankees specific sort of situation potentially. So I just don't know,
Yeah, because
don't know.
It stands in contrast to the typical, I always wanted to put on the pinstripes. There's nothing like the pinstripes. There's nothing like New York. And so, it's like we got to stand up for the honor of the city and the franchise.
Yeah.
Or kind of cast aspersions on the character of someone who would not want to be a Yankee because who couldn't possibly want to be one.
Oh, my God.
It's possible that in putting the word cash in Gray's mouth, maybe it's a paraphrase. Maybe Gray didn't actually say cash and he wasn't quoting him saying cash, but just kind of, referring to himself as cash. Or I guess, I don't know, a lot of people in baseball probably call Cashman Cash, but I don't know if you didn't know him and hadn't played for his team, maybe it would be weird to call him Cash, but I don't know. It's not a smoking gun in my mind. I'm inclined to believe Cashman, I guess, just because I have found him to be fairly frank when it comes to this sort of thing, though I guess he has some motivation to, because this is a trade that didn't really work out that well for the Yankees. Yeah, so to kind of make Gray seem duplicitous or make it seem like Cashman was snookered into trading for Gray or misled into thinking that he really wanted to be a Yankee when in fact he had reservations the whole time.
Right.
I mean, I guess what doesn't seem to be in dispute is that Gray did not want to be a Yankee, and he did say, at least publicly, that he was happy to be a Yankee. Now, what else are you going to say? I guess if you
else are you going to say?
Get traded to that team, he didn't have a say in being traded there. And so if he came out and said, well, this sucks, I didn't want to be here, that's generally not the best PR strategy. Much better to say, I love being here and I can't wait to stick it to your historic rivals. But this is all just so silly, and it adds fuel to the fire of the rivalry and will add another layer of intrigue when Gray pitches against the Yankees. And this is why I think it's good to have rivalries in sports, because we just get nonsense like this and it gets blown up into being meaningful. And who the heck cares, really? But it's just, another little layer on top of the decades of Yankees-Red Sox rivalry. It just gets blown all out of proportion because in sucking up to your team and its fan base, then you have to dump on the rival, and then the rival fires back. And now you have to question, well, does Gray really want to be in Boston? Does he really, does he love being on the Red Sox? Does he really want to stick it to the Yankees? Is he an unreliable narrator? Will he say whatever you want to hear because he knows how to worm his way in, because he's all about just making you think, pulling the wool over your eyes, and then later we'll find out he never wanted to be in Boston either. I mean, in this case, he did have to waive a no-trade clause, so he did have an opportunity not to be in Boston.
Yeah. I think that I do think that there is like some amount of buy-in here that is unusual relative to your typical trade, because he did have to waive the no trade clause. So if he had really wanted to throw his weight around, he supposedly could have. But I think it's fun. I think there should be more. I don't know. I don't want people to be jerks, but I've been watching, we were into conference championship play for college football.
Yeah.
And I watched the Indiana-Ohio State game. And, Indiana won, and it's this big exciting thing, and and they're talking to the quarterback, Indiana's quarterback after. And, these dudes are like media trained to within an inch of their lives.
Yeah.
And it just results in them really saying nothing, which is part of what they're trying to do. They're trying as best they can to not say anything that you remember at all, right?
Yeah.
But it makes for really boring interviews. It makes for really boring, engagement. And so I just think that it was, I don't know. I think that it's nice when they're like kind of a little bit nasty about it,
Yeah.
And that can be fun. Now, it's high stakes, right? To be clear, it's the lowest possible stakes. But within the realm of trash talking, to talk about the Yankees when you are now a member of the Boston Red Sox. I said that this back and forth doesn't get much play if the Yankees aren't the team on the other end of it. But the Yankees are the team on the other end of it. And Gray famously now plays for the Boston Red Sox. He's going to hear about this every time he pitches in the Bronx.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like every time. And if he has a bad start, it's going to be loud and brutal, and they will be very rude about it. And so I just think that it denotes a real confidence and is hilarious. And so there you go.
Yeah. Yankees fans, and really any fan, but Yankees fans perhaps in particular, they don't like to be spurned like this. And especially by a guy who didn't pitch up to his usual standards in New York. And this just adds fuel to the fire of he couldn't hack it in New York. He was not built for New York. That's why he hated it so much, because he just didn't have the mindset. He didn't have the temperament. But think of all of the storylines that the Yankees-Red Sox rivalry has given us this year. This drama, this back and forth. And then we had the Cam Schlittler back and forth about how, he grew up in Massachusetts and he has family and friends who are on the other side of the rivalry. Right. And then the whole conversation about, could they actually root for him having been Red Sox fans before, or could they root for him but not root for the Yankees? And then there was Twitter beef and people tweeting at his mom and all this, direct messages and all this drama about that bad mouthing and beef. Yeah. And then there was the weird Hunter Dobbins story where Hunter...
with his dad.
Yeah, Hunter Dobbins was like, right. I'd rather retire than be a Yankee. And then it was all about how there was this generational beef that he had inherited from his father, Lance Dobbins. But then it turned out that there was no reason for Lance Dobbins to have had this beef, and that either he had exaggerated his record or Hunter had misunderstood it or whatever it is. All of this nonsense comes out of this rivalry. And this is what sports is all about. I mean, it's also about the games and the winners and losers, but it's also about the trash talk and all the cultural aspects. And so what could be better than this stupid stuff? I love it.
Yeah. And it's it's calibrated right, because I guess you could interpret Gray. I mean, he is trashing the entire organization, but the person responding to him is the GM. And so it's not like Gray is picking on some, I don't know, dev coach or whatever. And it's that guy's no, he apparently hates them all. And Cashman is the embodiment of it. So it generalizes it, but specifies it in an important way. And he started it. So Cashman's within his rights to say something. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's perfect. I think it's great. And something about, Sonny Guy's not a big dude. Sonny Gray isn't a big guy. Sonny Guy? No, that's not right. Sonny Gray is not a big guy by professional athlete standards, right? And so there's something about a shorter statured pitcher being kind of red-assy about it that also adds a dynamic that's good, and then Cash. I would never I would never feel comfortable calling him that. It feels unprofessional, like to his face, as a media member to be like, hey, Cash. It's like, no, that's wrong. That's not right at all.
A lot of them do. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's pitched in just the right way, because there are times when trash talk can feel overly mean, right? There are moments where you're like, okay, hang on now. But this isn't one of those. You get to punch up at the Yankees, and granted, he's a professional baseball player and he plays for the Boston Red Sox, so it's not as if he's a Pittsburgh Pirate or anything. But it's, I don't know, you get into the rivalry, and I like it. I think it's good.
Me too. Okay, another little bit of off-season drama that we could perhaps touch on. Should we talk a bit about Bryce Harper and how he's doing?
Oh, we sure
Whether he's
should.
Okay, because
he's not. I mean, Ben, we can answer that question definitively right off the bat. Is he okay? Absolutely not.
Well,
right?
We know that his blood is bursting with ozone, so I don't know whether that's a good or bad thing, but I lean toward the latter. So we have kind of clowned, to use a Bryce phrase, clowned on the raw milk advocacy. And we've talked about how Bryce Harper has kind of become this like neuropathic, homeopathic healing, like sort of woo-woo, just health influencer kind of guy. Like it's
all very Maha coded, you know?
Yeah. He's
put it that way.
Very the raw milk and the hydrogen water and just all this. And it's, he's had a few photos come out, and I don't want to pick on a player's appearance too much, but it's raised some eyebrows. It's taken people aback, both because at least in one recent photo, he seemed to have lost a considerable amount of weight. At least it appeared that way. And, he's been a big strapping guy historically. Sure. And also seems to have aged facially. And, who among us has not? And baseball players, they get a lot of sun, it can make you look weathered. But the crow's feet, they have really spread significantly, noticeably in Bryce's case. I don't know whether any of this is connected, to be clear, but it's just he has a bit of a mountain man look going on, and it's not just the facial hair, but I don't know, something about his appearance. He seems to look a little older than his years subjectively, and older than he used to, which obviously he is, but he's not old. Bryce Harper, he's 33, right? He turned 33 recently.
Right.
Anyway, that's all perhaps related, but perhaps beside the point. But he seems very into these alternative treatments. And the latest is ozone therapy. And to be clear, it's not like coming to light in some expose or something. He's putting this out there.
He's posting it on Instagram.
Yeah, he wants everyone to know about this.
He wants everyone to know.
So we're not doing anything invasive or digging into his private life or his medicals or anything. He's broadcasting this very much. And so he put on Instagram this photo of him lying in a chair with just blood coming out of him and into him. Simultaneously, blood being cycled, filtered outside of his body, a procedure that I was not familiar with, I think for good reason.
Because you go to an actual doctor, Ben.
Right.
Because you go to an actual doctor with credentials.
I've become familiar with in recent days. But yes, it's ozone therapy. It goes by other names. According to his post, it's a procedure in which 1/3 of your blood is drawn from your body. That's a bad start right there. That's just
1/3 of your blood.
That's a lot of your blood.
1/3 of your.
And to be clear, it's replaced, because if it were not replaced, that would be potentially fatal. That's a lot of blood.
1/3 of your blood, Ben.
Yeah, but it's drawn from your body,
blood.
Passed through a quote unquote filtration and ozonation device, and then returned to your bloodstream. According to Bryce, circulates your blood outside your body, exposes the blood to ozone, O3, and will oxygenate or filter the blood before returning it to you. This will improve circulation, reduce inflammation, fight infections, support immune function, remove toxins, increase energy. Sounds great. I'm sold. Is there any evidence that this works?
Nope.
Not exactly. No, this is not FDA approved. It's
not even this FDA.
Yeah, it's seemingly been widely debunked. It sure seems to be snake oil. And, look, there are things that are outside of the medical establishment.
Sure.
I mean, everything that's in the medical establishment was at one point outside of the medical establishment, I suppose. And there are things that the medical establishment frowned upon and jeered at. And then subsequently it was discovered that, no, there was actually some merit to this. So, you can't immediately rule out everything just because it's not FDA approved, I guess. But what studies there are do not seem to confirm that there is any efficacy to this. And the person who is administering this treatment to Bryce, just the credentials don't speak to me as someone who I would necessarily want to entrust a third of my blood to, just saying. And, like a guy who became a doctor he was a chiropractic doctor. That's like what his degree is in, which I don't think is really related to having your blood drawn and filtered. So, like health and wellness type of guy. And I'm just imagining if you're the Phillies and you're seeing this post or, Bryce Harper's like friends and family, but for all I know, they recommended this to him. But if you're like the Phillies and this is a player you're counting on and have made a major investment in, and suddenly you see him doing some sort of like Silicon Valley weirdo wonky treatment, I would have some concerns. I don't really know what the policies are when it comes to like, does he have to get approval to do this? Like, does he have to inform the Phillies if he's getting some sort of medical procedure? Did they green light this? I have no idea, but it's a somewhat concerning turn that Mr. Harper has taken here.
Okay, so Ben. Ben. Boy, do I have some things to say about this. So you're right. The history of modern, quote unquote, Western medicine is rife with treatments that are misunderstood and then become legitimate. Yep. And the way they become legitimate is through scientific rigor and process, through careful peer-reviewed studies, through, in some cases, large-scale clinical trials. They don't tend to involve like a weirdo chiropractor who's not an MD taking 30 of your blood out and saying, this is good, you should put this on Instagram the way you'd put on like, getting your first pumpkin spice latte of the fall. And so I don't want to make any sort of claim that there aren't problems, shall we say, with major medical. There sure are. But guess what? They don't involve taking a 30 of your blood out from some chiropractor who doesn't have a medical degree. Yeah. If I were the Phillies, I would be incredibly concerned about this. And here's the thing. I have no idea. I am not a doctor, and so I will not assert the potential drawbacks of a treatment like this, other than the obvious, like, hey, you took a third of your blood out of your body and are putting it back in. That seems bad. Your blood, famously, it's better when it's in your body. Yeah. It's like a good thing to have it be in your body. But so that piece of it, I don't want to assert that I know exactly what this will do to him. I guess if you're the Phillies, the thing you're rooting for is that it does nothing. Yes. Right? Because it's almost certain to not do the things that he is claiming it does, but I don't know. It seems, I know that ozone is bad in general. You don't want ozone. We do all this work about ozone. Yeah. So do you want ozone in your body? Seems like the answer to that is no. Right.
That's the thing. Whenever you hear about toxins, now there are certain things that are actual toxins and are toxic to you, and ozone is one of them.
It's one of those things.
At least in some contexts. But when you hear remove toxins 90% of the time, it's just some kind of quackery usually, because it's like your body does a good job of filtering out toxins. Like we have organs that do that,
Right. He's like, hey, I'm doing, when he first put it up, I thought he was doing like voluntary dialysis or something.
Yeah.
And I was like, Bryce, I am going to assume that you have functional kidneys. My guy, you just let your kidneys do their work, filter out toxins. You have a liver, sir. You have a, so there's, if you're the Phillies, I just love Darren Dombrowski's going to get asked about this. He's going to get asked about this. Ron Johnson's going to get asked about this. They're going to be like, hey, where's all of Bryce's blood? Do you know?
Bryce,
where's
Bryce.
that? Where's that blood? What's going on here? They're going to spend part of their manager availability, GM, any GM availability they do talking about Bryce's blood. So that seems fantastic. But if you're the Phillies, you're hoping that like this doesn't really do anything at all.
Yes.
The part of it that's the most alarming, well, there are a couple of things, Ben, if we're being candid. There are a couple of things that are alarming about it, one of which is the third of the blood out of the body part and then back into the body. It seems like too much blood out and in at the same time. It is suggestive of Bryce Harper operating in a truly horrifying information ecosystem, right? For you to get to take a third of my blood out of my body, chiropractor man, please, suggests that you are swimming in some real weird waters. And we already kind of had a sense of that, right? Because again, this is a man who was like, pasteurization, not for me, which seemed not good. It's sort of, this is a digression and I will not dwell on it, but it is very weird to me. I mean, so much of it is weird to me. It's weird to me that the raw milk thing has caught on, because you would think that if you're in this sort of woo space, the fact that it's just heating it up, it would appeal to you because it's natural, right? There's not an additive. You're not putting anything in the milk. You're just, I mean, I'm not saying they never put stuff in milk, but like they're not, this process is just you're heating it up and then you're going to back down. So that part of it I find concerning, but I worry about the other things Bryce Harper believes about his own well-being. I worry about the vectors of information he has to other potentially more damaging things. I think that, I've seen before and afters floating around of Bryce and like, look, that looks like 20 miles of bad road, brother. But also sometimes people are comparing Bryce Harper today to like Bryce Harper as a 19-year-old debuting for the Nationals. And I'm like, well, he's 33 now and has multiple children. The photo of him as a 19-year-old on photo day with professional lighting versus him outside at 33, they are gonna look different even without raw milk being involved. So that feels like this shit's weird enough. We don't have to grasp at that particular straw. But yeah, he looks like he has lost weight or muscle mass. He kind of looks like the Liver King. He's got kind of, he's trending in an alarming Liver King direction.
Well, yeah, the fact that you mentioned that, and I don't mean to cast aspersions on what Harper is doing here, and this, some people thought, oh, is this some sort of like cycling blood doping type thing? This is dopey. I don't think it's doping. It's not performance enhancing. You hope it's not performance impairing, but it does kind of concern you because if he's taking whatever advice to do this, is he being careful about whatever other procedures are being done or substances? You'd hope that if he's taking any supplements from this person or anyone else, that he's getting those tested and cleared or whatever. But you kind of question the judgment, like when you're in this alternative medicine space, like what else could that potentially lead him into? I'm reading the credentials of this guy, Dr. Josh Redd, on his website. And there's a lot of language on here. It says, most recently he graduated from naturopathic medical school and completed his residency in regenerative medicine and stem cell injections through Bastyr University, which is actually, I guess, in Kenmore, Washington, if you want to check it out sometime next time you're home. But it says some of Bastyr's programs teach and research topics that are considered pseudoscience, quackery. This is not still on his website, by the way. I'm on Wikipedia now.
As an aside, that would be
truth
amazing.
in advertising. Yeah, no, but pseudoscience, quackery, and fake by the scientific and medical communities, numerous citations, Quackwatch, a group against health fraud, put Bastyr University on its list of questionable organizations as a school which is accredited but not recommended. And this guy's website does brag that he is managing the care of a growing number of professional athletes from around the world. It doesn't specify how many. It could be one, maybe zero grew to one Bryce Harper. But it does say including those in the NFL, MLB, NBA, and professional soccer. In the US and Europe, he helps them create medical plans for diet, nutrition, strength training, recovery, and for necessary medical interventions when injured. It notes that he has treated numerous high-profile athletes from around the world, some with contracts exceeding $100 million. We know one of them, at least. So one imagines that word has circulated, much like Bryce Harper's blood in this machine, among these ultra-rich athletes, and they have lots of income to spare. And some of them spend that unwisely in ways that plunges them into debt. And some of them, I guess, circulate a third of their blood. Not great either way, seemingly. So you hope he's being careful. And, you know, I hope that this is not like in response to other ailments that we don't know about. And who knows what's happening with his health that has driven him to make these changes, or whether this is like sort of a baseball midlife crisis kind of thing. It's like, you know, he's still a good player, but not as great as he was. And we even had that conversation about the Dave Dombrowski quotes earlier this offseason that kind of got blown out of proportion, where Dombrowski was talking about how he's been better and he's maybe past his prime. Hopefully he'll be better again. So who knows? Maybe that sort of stuff for a guy who was basically a baseball prodigy and was on the cover of Sports Illustrated when he's 16 and has been hailed as the great Bryce Harper since he was a teenager and has largely made good on that. You could imagine that when the skills start to slip a little bit, you know, maybe you cling extra hard to them and someone says, I can make you young again. We just have to rid your system of these toxins, how you might be susceptible to that. But
it parallels, you know, just to like extend it a bit, like it parallels a trajectory that is pretty common for folks who end up in this, operating in this space, and I would argue being taken advantage of by operators in this space. Now, Bryce Harper is an incredibly wealthy athlete. Bryce Harper has access to medical care that does not require him to engage in this sort of untested, unverified pseudoscience. And so I'll acknowledge the limitations of sort of the analogy here, but the way that a lot of people end up pursuing this kind of quote unquote treatment is when they feel that they feel a degradation in their own health, or, you know, in Harper's case, potentially in his performance as an athlete, and they are not satisfied with the solutions that are being offered to them by mainstream sort of nutrition and training techniques. And they are in search of alternatives that will help them to alleviate what ails them. Now, for most people who find themselves sort of on that path, it's stuff like, you know, cancer treatment not working, or they aren't being tended to in a healthcare system that is wildly flawed and not serving anyone particularly well. It's not, you know, I've lost 30 points of batting average or whatever, right? So again, like a strained comp potentially. And to your point, we don't know what is going on with Harper from a medical perspective, away from what we know of him as a baseball player who's, you know, hamstring strains or whatever get reported on the injured list. But you get how people get in a mindset like this. But you hope there's someone to help pull them back and sort of ground them in something that is more concrete, more rigorous, and less likely to result in some sort of, you know, potential problem or catastrophe. Because like I said, the thing you're hoping for if you're the Phillies is that this is a bunch of nothing that doesn't do anything. But like anytime, I don't want to overstate the risks to Bryce Harper, like as far as we know, all the blood's back in, right? But anytime you're getting stuck, you run the risk of infection. Anytime you're pulling a third of your blood out of your body, it seems like there's some sort of potential for something. So this isn't stuff that like people should just do willy-nilly, particularly when they're being attended to by people who don't have, I think, appropriate credentials to be administering healthcare. And the other thing I'd worry about if I were the Phillies is like, guys talk in locker rooms. Is Bryce Harper going to be the last raw milk drinking blood out of my body Philly? Right? Like you don't want this stuff
influential. He's a leader.
Right.
He's a star.
Right. And so I just think that there is a good bit of hokum involved here. And that's not good, right? Like, there are, I think, relatively benign beliefs in sort of, the kind of crunchy granola alternate healthcare space. And I want to acknowledge what you said earlier once again, which is that, like, I don't think, I'm not naive to the perspective that there are likely to be beneficial treatments that, are sort of naturopathic, and were they to be put to a rigorous sort of peer-reviewed approach, might stand up to scrutiny, right? I'm not out here like beating the drum for major medical, but I do think that there is stuff in that space that isn't benign, and if it inspires other people to pursue it, either because they are engaging in a treatment that is actively harmful to them, or potentially eschewing treatments that have a recognized benefit in favor of untested speculative treatment, like this stuff can go fast in a bad direction. And I do wish that Harper would be more responsible with this stuff, because he does have a massive platform. And I think a lot of people who do not have his resources to backstop them in the event that this stuff doesn't work or leads to some sort of issue are at much greater risk to have it go sideways. And he seems completely indifferent to all of that, And I know that like his perspective on major medical is having a moment, and that moment is directing federal policy right now. Mm-hmm. But, that doesn't mean that it's good or healthy. And as sympathetic as I am to the frustrations that people have with our healthcare system, she says as she prepares to pay $2,000 a year more in healthcare premiums, I do think there needs to be pushback on this stuff. And like there are jokes to be had here. And I hope everyone gets to have the experience of being like, isn't that blood doping? And then having Michael Bauman flip his lid on you because this is not blood doping. And boy, will a guy who has a very good cycling Substack tell you about it.
Yeah.
I don't know that he's on Substack anymore, but cycling newsletter. But once you're in these waters,
yeah,
it can be bad. It can get really bad really fast. And, I have skincare products that I put on my face. I call them my potion. Do they work? I don't fucking know, man. So we all have some susceptibility to this stuff, right? But there's woo and then there's woo. And some of the woo is you should be enthusiastic about Brian Woo. You should not be enthusiastic about this woo. And I think given the option to voluntarily remove a bunch of your blood or keep it inside, I think you keep it inside 100% of the time. That's the right answer 100% of the time, to keep the blood on
this quantity,
the inside.
I would say so. Now,
a third of your blood, Ben.
Bryce Harper.
Did he pass out while this was happening? Like, I know it went out and comes right back. It seems like it went out and came right back in, which as right. Bauman told me is one of the distinguishing characteristics from this being blood doping versus not, because you're not doing the red blood cell production. Anyway, it's a lot of blood. That That's too much of your blood. I want all my blood inside.
Wikipedia does say that it has been characterized as pure quackery. The therapy can cause serious adverse effects, including death. Now, you know, what kinds of therapy can't, I guess, right?
Sure.
The best therapies can cause death in small numbers, but it doesn't seem like there are benefits here that make it worth whatever small risks there are. But you know, maybe if you're Harper and you're an athlete and you've had people poking and prodding at your body parts your whole life, maybe it seems sort of normal to you. Bryce Harper has had PRP injections. He's had platelet-rich plasma treatments, and that's, you know, you take some blood out of you and you spin it around and you get the platelets all thick and just inject it back into yourself, and hopefully
we gotta get those thick platelets.
Helps you heal a little bit more. So maybe he's thinking, you know, they take blood out, they put blood in. What's the difference, right? I mean, the quantity is the one difference. But this association seemingly goes back a bit. This post just went viral, but I'm looking at Dr. quote unquote, not medical doctor, Josh Red's Instagram. And I see a post from last November that says, I've known Bryce and Kay Harper for a few years now. They are so passionate about longevity, clean living, and optimizing their health. I'd even be willing to bet there isn't another athlete out there that eats cleaner. They are both dialed. Anyway,
they are both dialed.
Yeah, not dialed in, just dialed.
Dialed.
They go back a bit. So whatever this relationship is, it's not a new one for better or worse. But and you know, I'm assuming that this was not like someone the Phillies hooked him up with. We don't know exactly how this happened. Maybe we'll learn more.
I'd be skeptical.
Yeah, but what you were saying before about how people can fall prey to this sort of stuff, and it's easy, and you start Googling and you go down a rabbit hole, and maybe you don't have great care, or you know, you've been stymied by the medical establishment who hasn't believed in your symptoms, and so you turn to alternatives, and that happens.
Yes.
But if you're Bryce Harper, you know, I don't know if this is an indictment of him or the Phillies medical staff or either, but it suggests like if this was not done at the Phillies' behest, then like what's the communication going on between Harper and the Phillies like? Like, does he trust their input? Because he has all the resources in the world, unlike most people. Not only does he have a lot of money, but he also
has great insurance.
Great insurance. He's got a medical staff that is devoted to keeping him healthy. He's got, you know, dietitians, I'm sure, nutritionists, trainers, all the rest. So if he wanted to get the skinny on like, does this actually work? What's the evidence here? What should I try?
He could call.
Yes, who it's their job to help him with this, and they have made a major investment in him. So if he has turned his back on that, or if he has not explored those resources that are available to him, then I'm less forgiving of that than I am for just average person who has average resources.
I can only imagine the desperation that the Phillies medical director must be feeling in these moments to be like, Bryce, buddy, I'll take your call on Christmas Day rather than have you do this, you know? And again, like I have a tremendous amount of sympathy for, you know, the feeling of through no fault of your own, through the simple process of aging, just losing a step. I feel the impact of that. I have had like, you know, not dark thoughts, but like you grapple with like, wow, is my back just going to feel like this for the rest of my life? And like, I'm a baseball writer, you know, I don't have to produce on the field, you know, and so it's a thing that starts to stare you down a lot earlier in your life than you necessarily anticipate, right? And like Harper's younger than I am. It's like I'm going to be 40 next year, and like I have back issues now, and anyway, I don't have to bore our listeners with my chart, but you know, so I get how it can feel really disorienting. It like comes on you faster than you think it's going to, even when you're like, I'm pretty active and I take good care of myself and I eat, you know, a balanced diet and I don't overdo it on substances and all this stuff, right? And like you can feel like you got sideways on yourself in a way you didn't anticipate at a much earlier age than you were expecting. And so I have sympathy for that. And I can't imagine the pressure that he feels to be Bryce Harper, right? And so like I don't want my my read of this to strike people as like completely uncharitable. But also, as you said, he just has so many people around him who are super invested in helping him figure out like how to be the best baseball player he possibly can be. And it's not like he's unplayable or anything. He had a 131 WRC plus last year, you know, like he still hit 27 home runs. And I know that he's dealt with injury and he's had, you know, back and forth from the IL over the last couple of years. And so like he's starting to be a baseball player in his mid-30s, right? And to your point, when you've been like this golden god since you were 16, I can imagine that feeling profoundly destabilizing to like who you are as a person.
Harper, there's no hiding from the contrast because you've been the best, and any little tick of bat speed or foot speed or anything you lose, it's highly apparent to everyone. It's tracked. It's public knowledge. Yeah, it's tough to reckon with that.
And you got, you know, people on the internet putting up pictures of you at 19 and 33 and saying, my God. And it's like, what am I supposed to look exactly the same as I did? Now, again, Bryce, buddy, you need some of my face potions because something not good's happening over here. So I don't want to downplay it either. But I have some sympathy. But he is just, there are few people in the world more completely and profoundly backstopped by resource and expertise than this guy. And he is fallen prey to some real hooey. I want him to be a good baseball player because he's so fun to watch when he's on. I want him to be well as a person, both physically and mentally. But I also want him to, you know, shoulder some responsibility for the platform he has and keep in mind the people who are not in the same position that he is, who aren't so well tended, and who are going to look at him and go, yeah, maybe I should put some raw milk in here, you know? And I would invite them to not do that. I would invite them to embrace pasteurization, keep your blood on the inside of your body, you know? And there's just like so many red flags in that statement. Committed to longevity. Is that what he said?
Yeah.
Like the Instagram algo of these people has to just be rancid, you know, as deep and dark as raw milk, maybe, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know. There is a part of it that is objectively very funny. And then there is a part of it that is just like, oh my God, we're in such a freaking dark age for this stuff. And, you know, it's not good, Ben. It's not good.
Be careful, Bryce. He's probably fine. He'll probably be fine, but I hope he'll be fine because I enjoyed Bryce Harper's career. So
it's probably not going to do anything at all. And who knows? Maybe he'll have some like placebo effect experience. But it's like the likely benefit is nothing, and the grossest downside is that like this. I am clearly demonstrating how much respect I have for chiropractors and the way that I keep saying the word chiropractor like it's a slur or something. But, you know, that this guy doesn't like clean his needles and then he gets like a flesh eating. Like, that happens to people. Don't go to med spas either, everyone. You stay away from those med spas. You don't know who's in there doing what. You don't know where they've been. I don't mean that in like a weird way. I just mean you don't know what their credentials are. You stay away from med spas. They are everywhere in Arizona, Ben. There are so many med spas. I couldn't believe that John Oliver did a segment on med spas, and I'm like, there's a lot less Arizona in this than I anticipated there being. I thought there would be 100% more Arizona. We play a little game where we're like, are we going to be one of the bad states that gets illuminated on the map? And almost without fail, Ben. Almost without fail.
Yeah. Okay. I have a note about two trades that I don't have a ton to say about, but I will lump them together because I think they're sort of similar in a way, and that's the Mariners and Nationals trade, which is primarily Harry Ford to the Nats for Jose A. Ferrer, and also a right-handed pitching prospect going to the Nationals too.
Their 10th rounder from last year,
Yep. And then there's also the Pirates-Red Sox trade as the big spender got some money to burn to do away with their grievances and change the revenue sharing agreement. Pirates, motivated to spend more than the Pirates typically do. But they start off with a trade with the Red Sox. They send Johan Oviedo to Boston for primarily Yostinson Garcia, better known as Password.
Password.
Yes, and there are other prospects in this trade as well. But those are the headliners. And I think the similarity here is that the headline prospect in each deal was blocked. And that's one of the time-honored ways that you get trades and trades of younger players is that there's just no path to playing time for them. So Harry Ford, still a decent prospect for the Mariners. He's been a top 100 guy for a few years running. And I mean, I guess a few years running, that's not always a good sign because it means that you have not yet lost your prospect eligibility. And maybe you haven't had a chance to because you are hopelessly blocked by Cal Raleigh, who never takes a day off, basically, and signed a 6-year extension. And so where the heck are you going to play if you're Harry Ford? Yeah. And, and now they don't have a vacancy. They signed Naylor to a long-term deal too, so you can't really stick Ford at first base or anything. I know they were kind of toying around with him as an outfielder, but
first base would have been sort of a waste of Harry Ford's athleticism, in my opinion.
And if you can catch, and he can seemingly, he can be a competent catcher, then he's of the most value doing that as long as he can. And so he was not going to be of the most value to the Mariners. And so they traded him for Jose Ferrer, who, is probably pretty under the radar because he was on the Nationals, for one thing.
And his surface level stats aren't particularly sterling.
Yeah, it's another just broken record. Every pitcher we talk about these days, ERA minus FIP. It's the same with Gray and Helsley and Cease and Williams and all the rest, but same deal with Jose Ferrer. He has underperformed his FIP for now 3 years running. I mean, parts of years at least. And his career ERA is 4.36, a run higher than his FIP, 3.33. And it was almost a run and a half difference in 2025. But he was the Nationals closer for a time, which, says maybe more about the Nationals than it says about Ferrer. But I like Ferrer. He seems to be a guy with some potential, high ground ball rate, throws hard, what reliever doesn't these days, but, through 76 and a third innings, decent strikeout rate for a guy who gets ground balls 60% of the time or more. Good walk rate too. I mean, he kind of does it all. And, he even limited home runs last year. It's like, I look at his stats and I think, how did he not have a better ERA? And I guess looks like he's had a low strand rate historically. So, maybe there's kind of bad timing or something about pitching with runners on base or whatever. But a lot of the numbers are pretty solid here. And he's 26 years old or 25. He hasn't even turned 26 yet. Under team control for 4 more years, something like that. So, kind of a good buy low candidate who could maybe be a hard worker in that pen for years to come. And maybe they could even unlock a little more with him because he's been mostly a sinker baller to this point, but he seems to have some good secondaries too. So I like that acquisition. Usually I guess I wouldn't love trading a good prospect who is a catcher for a reliever, but when you consider the mitigating circumstances, I guess you could say, could they have gotten a better deal for Ford either now or at some point in the past? But maybe this was what is available to them now.
Yeah, I think, look, Ford, I think, has been a trade candidate for them for the better part of a year now. And I imagine that, when they were making moves to try to upgrade the team at the deadline, he was probably floated as a potential prospect to be acquired. I can't believe this might mean that I get to live more of the Mitch Garver experience, but we'll that part of it's less important. But I think that, you're right. Cal is entrenched there in, a profound way. So, what are you going to do? They definitely needed a left-handed arm out of that bullpen. They needed a left-handed arm out of the bullpen in the playoffs. I think that when you take Ferrer through Mariners pitching dev and see what you get with him, that it makes that side of it more appealing. They aren't going to move any of the, the infield prospects, like the non-catching infield prospects, I don't think, unless it's for something very significant. And so it seemed like a kind of straightforward swap in that regard. I like it for the Nationals. Like, I think that Harry Ford is certainly a capable catcher. I don't think he's the best defensive catcher, but I also think that he is a sure upgrade over anything that the Nationals have on board right now. Like, you can't go into your next rebuilding or contention cycle with like Keibert Ruiz as your answer, right? So they had to do something there. I think that they'll be able to give Ford a lot of big league run and kind of see what they have with him. The potential for a good left-handed reliever out of that bullpen when you have a team that is still very far from being like a postseason contender makes Ferrer sort of expendable from their perspective. So, I thought it made better sense for both sides than it initially seemed. I think that you can say that they are selling, they being the Mariners, a little low on Ford, while also acknowledging that, they're top 100 prospects and they're top 100 prospects, right? I think that gets bandied about as if all of these guys are the same. And Ford ended up being, I think, sort of higher up for us at the end of the year. But some of that is just like the relative strength of the minor leagues right now versus prior years. So, he's a 50, but he's a 50. He's not, the best catching prospect in baseball. He would have netted more if he were, but I thought it was fine, and then, you look at the Red Sox moves and it's like, oh, they dealt an outfielder to try to get help other places. Right. Sure, they did. I mean, that's exactly what they should do. Yep. So I thought a lot of these, all of these moves sort of made sense. I think it's fine. The real question is we have the password, but what are we going to call his brother? We got to come up with a nickname for Garcia's brother, because I don't know if you know this, but he's got quite the first name also. Mm-hmm. Can't call him the password. That's already taken, Ben. Yep. Yeah,
it's true. Yeah, it's a bummer to me that Keibert Ruiz has just stagnated.
I know. Stagnated is generous.
Yeah,
it is
gone backwards.
It's gone bad. It's gone real bad there.
It's the framing is bad, but the hitting is not good either. He was promising. He was a top prospect himself, and I thought would be pretty good at one point. And yeah, that has not turned out to be the case. So this hasn't
turned out to be the case.
I don't know if they will give him another shot or they'll just slot Ford right in there because he hit decently at AAA this season. And I don't know if that'll be a timeshare or if they'll just move on from Ruiz. But we'll see. Anyway,
we'll see.
The rotation that the Red Sox have assembled now actually rates as the number 2 projected rotation at FanGraphs, according to Steamer.
So confusing.
I know. Crochet, Gray, Bayo, and then I don't know exactly. There's just a lot of guys after that, and some guys who were hurt, but you kind of put them all together, Sandoval and Cutter Crawford and Connolly Early and Kyle Harrison, and now Oviedo's in the mix, and Peyton Tolley and Hunter Dobbins. It's a lot of depth, I guess. Yeah. I can't even really identify the bottom of the rotation versus number 6 and 7 and 8, but it runs pretty deep in guys who could credibly be a back of the rotation starter. And with Crochet and Gray, lifelong Yankee hater, even when he was one, they even then have a pretty decent top of the rotation. Yeah. So and the Pirates also sort of dealing from depth in that even post Oviedo, they have the number 5 projected rotation. And the Blue Jays are at number 6, so they've made moves to supplement that, which we've talked about. A couple strong rotations in the AL East there. I was thinking in Oviedo, not that you could call him a prospect at this point, but I guess you never really can call a pitcher a blocked prospect. You'd never really say that a pitcher was blocked, even if a team had a great rotation.
Oh, yeah.
I guess it happens. Was Bubba Chandler kind of blocked? I don't know if he was blocked so much as he was just sort of left out.
Right.
But maybe he would say that he was blocked or service time manipulated or something. But you can't really be blocked as a pitcher for very long because there are just many more.
Be waiting.
Yeah, there are many more roster spots for pitchers, and so many pitchers get hurt, and you can slot in as a reliever even if you're blocked in the rotation temporarily. So, yeah, pretty tough to be a blocked prospect as a pitcher. But
yeah,
the Pirates are sort of dealing from strength their relative strength because their hitting is a weakness. So, Password, he's kind of a high risk, high reward, I guess, volatile type of prospect.
Sure.
But that's the kind of guy that the Pirates should be acquiring. And there's just no way that he really would have broken into that Red Sox outfield anytime soon. So makes sense.
It makes sense. It makes a ton of sense.
What may or may not make sense to everyone, lastly, is that Jeff Kent is a Hall of Famer.
Sure.
He was elected by the Eras Committee, the only person who was on the ballot who passed muster this year. And I don't know how I feel. Mostly I just kind of don't care anymore. But I think this is sort of illustrative of why I don't care, because it's such a confusing process and the standards are so different. Like, Jeff Kent is far from the least deserving Hall of Famer.
Sure.
He's better than a lot of players who are in the Hall of Fame and even have gotten in fairly recently. And if someone wanted to say that their Hall of Fame line is just below Jeff Kent and he clears it, that's okay. That's defensible. He's in the neighborhood, I guess, statistically speaking. So I wouldn't really rag on that pick purely in isolation. It's just that there's so many more deserving players who are still not in. And if you think he deserves it, then, him not being the best possible inductee is not an argument against inducting him. But it's just so perplexing, even if you just look at second base, because, like, statistically speaking, his credentials, his WAR, his JAWS or whatever, he's not really that distinguishable from, say, Ian Kinsler, who went one and done on the ballot last year, or Dustin Pedroia, who didn't go one and done but had a slow start, or, and more glaringly, guys who were not even up for consideration. Like, he's clearly not as good as Lou Whitaker or probably Willie Randolph or Bobby Grich, like all these guys who were on the short list of Cooperstown snubs and were not even eligible to be voted on in this era's committee meeting, even though they could have been.
Yeah.
They were from the right era.
Right.
And then, you could lump Chase Utley in there as well. It's just, why Jeff Kent, I guess? And I guess I kind of understand why, but it's such a strange system where you have this kind of backdoor of the committee system, which has righted some wrongs historically, but has also just kind of rubber stamped some guys who had their day, had their airing, were on many a ballot and just were rejected by the writers, understandably, and then they just sail right in. And even, like, looking at the other players who were on this ballot with him, it's just kind of hard to figure out why. Like, Kent got 14 votes. So and it was 14 members on this committee, right? So every person.
I think it's 16.
16. Okay. So 14 out of 16. That's right. 87.5% voted for Kent. Carlos Delgado was second with 9.
Yeah, he played surprisingly well. Jay Jaffe was quite surprised by his showing.
Yeah. And then Mattingly got 6. Dale Murphy got 6. And it's just... It's like, what separates Dale Murphy, for instance, from Carlos Delgado? And I don't really get it. I mean, Murphy didn't have a long career. He just, tailed off. I mean, he just kind of cratered at a certain point, but still has, like the good peak and as good credentials as Delgado. And of course, if you're someone who thinks Bonds and Clemens should be in there, then it's just preposterous that Jeff Kent gets in and Barry Bonds. Bonds, Clemens, and Sheffield, and Fernando Valenzuela got fewer than 5 votes, which means that they're not even eligible to be on the next era's committee ballot. So the soonest they could be voted on again by this committee is 2031.
Yep.
And if they get fewer than 5 votes again that time, then they're off
permanently
for
ineligible.
good.
Yeah.
Unless
Now,
they change the rules again, which,
right. I was going to say that assumes that they don't change the committee rules, which
this is
boy,
a new
do they
rule in itself.
love to change the committee rules.
Yeah, this under 5 votes thing is a new thing.
Right,
so,
this year.
Yeah, but it's, I mean, I get it. Like, you can make a coherent distinction between Jeff Kent and Barry Bonds. Like, obviously it seems sort of silly because Barry Bonds is so much better than Jeff Kent, and they were teammates for years, and Jeff Kent was maybe even partly kind of a product of Barry Bonds, like hitting behind Bonds and having Bonds on base ahead of him so much certainly helped him, and he took advantage of that, of course, but it kind of puts it in stark relief. But, if you want to say that Bonds is too tainted by PEDs and also like off the field stuff, then that's consistent, at least philosophically consistent.
Right.
It's also, kind of like, what are we doing here? What are we really recognizing? But if you want to go all in on character clause, okay, except that like Jeff Kent, I mean, he doesn't have the same demerits either like in a baseball sense or personal life sense that Bonds and Clemens do, but he was known as not a popular guy, not a, very prickly with teammates and reporters and all the rest. And of course, there was, the time when he lied again about how he hurt himself in a very silly way. So he's not someone you would really make a pro case for based on the character clause, unlike, say, Dale Murphy, who just no one has a negative word to say about. And he seems like, everyone cites him as, well, if the character clause keeps people out, then it should also put people in. And maybe Dale Murphy could be that guy. I also feel bad for Gary Sheffield a little bit, just because he has been lumped in with all the PED people. And he seems to at least have a fairly credible case that he should not be lumped together with them. That the only evidence that he used is this like one small dollar amount check that was like went to Balco, but he was training with Bonds at the time. And his story is that there was just one time where he was training with Bonds and he hurt himself and like ripped some stitches out, and a trainer for Bonds applied the cream or the clear or whatever it was. And so
I think it was the cream.
Sheffield did not knowingly use PEDs, and that was the one time. And who knows, of course, we'll never know. But, he at least has a better argument for not having taken that stuff in a rampant way than some other guys do. And, he was kind of just a favorite of mine as a player. So I, like, if he has been, like, tarred with that brush unfairly, then that stinks for him. But, we'll never really know. We'll never really know about anyone from that era. But yeah, it's kind of a weird one. It's just Jeff Kent, I mean, I guess, but there are just so many other seemingly more deserving players that just weren't even under consideration for who knows why.
I don't have any strong feelings about Jeff Kent one way or the other.
Yeah.
I do think him getting in on his own from this class is weird. I think it's a weird group. And I had some optimism about what this committee might sort of do, because it didn't seem like it was being intentionally loaded to result in a particular outcome in the same way that some era committees are, right? Like there are some connections between committee members and the guys on the ballot, but it isn't like some of the years where you either have like a very vocal anti-PED contingent or, a bunch of guys who played with or were executives with teams that some of the candidates played for. So it felt like there was, room for this to be sort of a more independent or honest process. And I just thought it was odd. I think that these guys, to your point, like, I don't know what I would do if I had a ballot while Bonds and Clemens were on the ballot, the writer's ballot. I find Jay's argument that, like, we should distinguish between guys who, were around and potentially using or were tied to PEDs prior to there being a rule and a testing regime. We should distinguish those guys from, like, Alex Rodriguez, who failed multiple tests and served suspensions, right? That distinction makes sense to me. I don't know where I would have landed on the question because I never really had to consider it in a way that had my name behind it. But I get get that distinction. I get if it's just a non-starter for you. I was really disappointed with Fernando Valenzuela's showing on this. I think that we should be a bit more expansive in our understanding of like what these era committees are for. And he was so important to the game in ways that went beyond, a very good, but probably not Hall of Fame worthy playing career. Yeah, I don't know. It's just a weird result. I find the whole thing very, very strange. I every year find myself approaching the committees, the era committees with just like a posture of skepticism. I don't know. I don't know if we're doing what we should with this. I don't know that it is always ensuring that guys who sort of were hard luck exclusions are getting the consideration that they deserve. And, the Hall just seems so kind of brazen in the way that it is trying to like tilt these committees away from, someone like Bonds or Clemens ever really getting an honest and throw a bunch of consideration. They don't want them in there. It's so clear that they don't want them in there. And, it's their institution, but it's weird to have them, talking about like the prestige and the honor and it meaning this great thing. And then you're constantly changing the rules to keep, guys like Bonds out. And I don't know. I mean, like, who knows? Maybe they'll decide that they really don't want Pete Rose in there. And then I'll be like, the wise and thoughtful committees with their perfect decisions and all of their integrity. I don't want to say that any individual voter is necessarily doing anything wrong, but they can stack these groups in a way that guarantees a specific result. Although maybe not, because they sure seem to want Don Mattingly in the Hall of Fame, and he hasn't gotten in yet. And I have not considered that question for myself. But the way that they keep cycling some of these guys through, it's like, geez, just decide and put them in yourselves. Like, what are we doing? Like. You're rigging some of these. Rigging is probably too strong, but putting your thumb on the scale, but like maybe just press down harder so we can get on with it. This is taking forever.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I guess Kent was kind of outspoken against PD use, so maybe that endeared him to the same people who don't want other guys who took steroids in. But I'm always sort of skeptical of players whose case rests on one fun fact, where it's just like most homers by a second baseman or most wins in the 1980s or something, which most homers by a second baseman is more impressive than most pitcher wins in the 1980s, which was trotted out there for Jack Morris all the time. It's valuable to hit lots of home runs, as Jeff Kent did, even if it's a position that you don't really associate with home runs. And it's notable because second basemen don't hit a lot of home runs usually, but still, like, that was valuable that he did that. But yeah, when you have to boil it down to that and you just hear that incessantly, it's almost like you're trying to get one over, you're trying to kind of like do a little sleight of hand or something, just hide the downsides of the case by pumping up this one fact that seems Cooperstown caliber. And it's always like when, Kent gets in, probably that's heavily dependent on him having been an MVP winner. If he never wins the MVP in 2000, then would he have been a Hall of Famer? And in no other year did he finish higher than sixth in MVP voting. And even then year, 2000, he was fifth in National League WAR, according to both Baseball Reference and FanGraphs, behind Barry Bonds, incidentally. I guess it was just like, well, we can't give it to Bonds every year, and Kent was close this year at least. But if that award had gone in a different direction, then probably his candidacy doesn't advance to this point. So sometimes a decision that was made a quarter century ago, that then is the thing that gets a guy in. Anyway, I'm not really that upset about Kent getting in one way or another. It's more just about the inconsistency of it all and the two different tracks to get in, and then even the inconsistency within the committee track. I've just sort of soured on the whole process, really.
Yeah. And I feel like, it's a tricky balance, right? Because there's like a process that has to happen. And so I know that our ability to like rapidly evaluate and elect guys is limited. Like the speed with which we want that to happen in some instances is going to outpace our ability to actually do it. If a guy is a Hall of Famer, I want him to be able to enjoy being inducted while he's alive. And so I appreciate why we need to have this like Hall of Fame, like bycatch at the end where there's a committee process and we're making sure that guys who maybe didn't get the attention they deserved on the writer's ballot get their due. And so I want that to happen. I am conscious of the fact that there is like, probably still a fair amount of like historical injustice that needs to be undone about guys who preceded, integration, who preceded this, who are part of an older committee process. And there is a committee process for that, but that they are not being like considered with the speed with which we might want them to. And so it's like, maybe we need to run many committees at the same time. Maybe it should always be Hall of Fame season. Jay's like, please don't put this idea in the Hall of Fame set. But you know what I mean? It's like, it is a tricky thing. There are a lot of different interests that we're trying to balance here. And, some of these guys, I think are being, it's like they're not getting the attention they deserve on the Eras Committee. Everybody's candidacies got truncated to 10 years. They're kind of getting done dirty at both ends of the process. They won't let us vote for more than 10, like let the writers do more. Let us. I mean, not you. Not you.
Yeah.
I'm 3 years away, I think. 3 years? 3 years. I think it's 3.
Okay.
I think
All right.
I'm 3.
Well,
anyway.
Maybe you can go down to the Hilton lobby and prod people with sticks like in the come on, do something meme and make them make some moves so that we can have some more fresh transactions to talk about next time.
Because we got a pod again tomorrow.
Get to it, teams.
Ben, what are we going to talk about tomorrow?
We'll find out along with our listeners. Well, not a major move, but after we recorded, the Rangers did sign Tyler Wade to a minor league deal, crucially keeping him away from the Orioles' Taylor Ward. As the Offspring sang, you gotta keep them separated. You can support Effectively Wild on Patreon by going to patreon.com/effectivelywild and signing up to pledge some monthly or yearly amount to help keep the podcast going, help us stay ad-free, and get yourself access to some perks. As have the following 5 listeners: Richie P., Becca C., MHT. Wow, all these Patreon supporters' names are rhyming. Trevor Howitt. Well, not Trevor's. That's okay, Trevor. And Rob Kimbrough. Thanks to all of you. Patreon perks include access to the Effectively Wild Discord group for patrons only, monthly bonus episodes, playoff live streams, personalized messages, prioritized email answers, discounts on merch and ad-free FanGraphs memberships, and so much more. Check out all the offerings at patreon.com/effectivelywild. If you are a Patreon supporter, you can message us through the Patreon site. If not, you can contact us via email. Send your questions, your comments, your intro and outro themes to podcast@fangraphs.com. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/effectivelywild. You can find the Effectively Wild subreddit at r/effectivelywild. And you can check the show notes in the podcast post at FanGraphs or in the episode description in your podcast app. Remember, that's where you can find the link to sign up for Effectively Wild's Secret Santa. The deadline is December 10th. Thanks to Shane McKeon for his editing and production assistance. We'll be back with another episode soon. Talk to you then.
Automne, le stade glace, le before sont chouettes, les avis pétantes et super une fête. Je pense que c'est effectively cool. Je pense que c'est effectively wild. Effectivement sauvage. Effectivement sauvage.